Well, I do think the Sussex Overdrive is unbelievable, but I mean, I don't think that he is going to get back in. I mean, I think that
Kate was called Waity Katie, waiting to marry William. While I imagine that was really hard, and I can't picture what that felt like.
Tom Bower, the investigative journalist known for his deep dives into royal family secrets, has finally broken his silence on the explosive claims surrounding Meghan Markle. For months, while rumours about the Sussexes and their controversies swirled, Bower remained quiet. This silence stood out, especially for a man who built his reputation on aggressive investigations. But for Bower, silence was never a sign of hesitation. It was a methodical choice. He didn't respond to rumours in real time. Instead, he waited. He observed how people reacted to the rumours, who denied, who stayed silent, and who changed their behaviour. For Bower, these reactions were as significant as any statement. And in his world, silence was not absence, it was data.
But they could never win. We know now in hindsight that Meghan never really intended to stay. Her guest list to her wedding showed her real ambition.
This is where Bower's approach to Meghan Markle's place in the royal family's controversies becomes critical. Bower didn't view Meghan as the sole cause of these scandals. Instead, he framed her as a constant figure near key moments of tension within the royal family. Whether it was Prince Andrew's legal issues, the media fallout surrounding the Sussexes' projects, or the palace's consistent silence on certain matters, Meghan's name kept surfacing. Bower wasn't interested in individual allegations. He was more concerned with the patterns of response to these scandals. When the palace reacted to some claims and ignored others, Bower saw this as an evolving pattern, one that would eventually reveal something far more significant than the stories themselves. Bower's silence wasn't an oversight. It was strategic. He understood that in the world of the royals, silence often speaks louder than any statement. The palace is trained to respond to issues proportionally. Crises that threaten constitutional stability are addressed immediately. Issues that are reputational or speculative are left untouched. But over time, ignoring certain controversies creates a visible pattern. This pattern, as Bower observed, started to raise questions. Why did the palace remain silent on some issues and react swiftly to others? For Bower, this wasn't random. Silence, he argued, was often a calculated move to prevent further escalation. Initially, public speculation around Meghan was dismissed as tabloid excess. However, as similar questions resurfaced over time without any official correction, silence began to feel intentional. And this is when Bower's commentary became crucial. Instead of introducing new allegations, Bower chose to speak out only when the timing was right. He explained why some claims continued to resurface despite the lack of solid proof. His goal was to shine a light on the system of silence itself, to explain why certain stories lingered and why certain responses were absent. This wasn't about validating rumours, but about revealing why some rumours stuck in the first place. For Tom Bower, Meghan Markle was not the source of the royal scandals, but her presence at moments of crisis created a recurring stress point for the palace. When a particular figure or couple becomes associated with turbulence, even indirectly, institutions tend to manage around them rather than confront the controversy directly. This was not about blame. It was about understanding how institutions, particularly the royal family, adapt their strategies in response to repeated controversy. Bower made it clear that institutions don't need wrongdoing to change their strategy, they simply respond to pressure and unpredictability. When a figure consistently appears in moments of crisis, that alone can alter how institutions behave. Bower's analysis also revealed a significant misconception, that silence equals weakness. In reality, Bower argued, silence is often the strongest response an institution can make. It avoids legal exposure, it denies oxygen to the controversy, and it allows time to reduce the relevance of the issue. The palace, according to Bower, wasn't using silence to protect individuals. It was using it to protect itself from further escalation. When the palace doesn't engage with a controversy, it's because engaging would make it more difficult to control. This approach reframes how people view the royal family's non-responses. What was once perceived as avoidance or endorsement now becomes a deliberate act of containment. For Prince Harry, Bower's comments were particularly destabilising. Harry had always believed that if something was important, the palace would address it openly. He assumed that silence meant indifference, but Bower's analysis challenged that assumption. Silence, Bower explained, often means that the concern has been assessed, and engaging with it would only escalate the issue further. For Harry, this shift in perspective forced him to reconsider his understanding of the palace's behaviour. What he once interpreted emotionally, Bauer suggested, was actually a strategic move by an institution that values stability above all else. Bauer's commentary was not just about Meghan. It had a profound impact on how the public, the media, and even the palace understood silence. By framing silence as strategy, Bauer changed the conversation entirely. Instead of focusing on whether the claims about Meghan were true, the public started questioning why certain claims were addressed while others were ignored. This shift is crucial because it's harder to dismiss a pattern of behaviour than to challenge individual allegations. Bauer's analysis of silence and institutional behaviour didn't settle any specific claim, but it made silence itself a central part of the conversation. The effect of Bauer's words was immediate, though muted. The palace didn't respond. It never does when confronted with contextual analysis. Responding would elevate Bauer's framing. Ignoring him allowed his words to settle without confrontation. For Meghan and Harry, this strategic silence had a more personal effect. Bauer didn't accuse them directly, but his comments undermined one of their key defences, that silence meant a lack of concern. Now, thanks to Bauer, silence was seen as a calculated response to minimise risk, not a sign of indifference. In Hollywood and the media, Bauer's words were treated differently. Rather than being seen as a revelation, they were confirmation of what many had already suspected, that royal silence wasn't due to indecision, but strategy. This recognition contributed to a shift in the media's approach to Meghan and Harry. Instead of rallying behind them, institutions began to approach them with more caution. Silence, it seemed, had become a permanent fixture in the narrative surrounding the Sussexes. As the public conversation shifted, Bauer's words became more important. They didn't settle the debate about what was true, but they changed the framework through which the debate was conducted. Silence, once seen as a void, was now understood as a deliberate strategy. And once silence is recognised as a strategy, it loses its neutrality. It becomes a message in itself, one that institutions use to maintain control. For Meghan and Harry, this understanding of silence became a new challenge. No longer could they rely on emotional responses or public sympathy to drive their narrative. The world was now questioning why the palace had responded the way it did, and why certain stories were allowed to linger without resolution. In conclusion, Tom Bauer's decision to speak out wasn't about revealing new secrets or accusing Meghan Markle of orchestrating scandals. It was about explaining the strategic use of silence within the royal family. By doing so, he not only shifted the public conversation, but also exposed the underlying patterns of behaviour that govern the monarchy's actions. For Meghan and Harry, the impact was profound. Their ability to shape their narrative was now diminished, as the public's focus shifted from the truth of specific claims to the patterns of institutional behaviour. Silence had become a strategy, and once that strategy was revealed, it was almost impossible to ignore.